Hey everyone, it's Michael and
Reuben
from Bullion Now, bullionnow.com.au, coming to you sort of live from the BN bunker.
And I'm actually in the bunker this time.
That's right, we let Reuben know where it is and invited him down. So, look, this is probably not what I was planning on doing today, but as many of you would have seen last night on the ABC, if you were living within Australia, obviously, there was a program put on by Four Corners about particularly in relation to the Perth Mint and some of its practices and procedures. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that I came away with the impression of hatchet job, but we'll see if Reuben cuts that out of the video. Look, I found the program to be full of innuendo and not much substance. And yeah, okay, let's get the biases out the way first. I work in the industry. We sell gold, silver, platinum, palladium, rhodium. So I obviously have a vested interest in this. We also sell the Perth Mint product, so we obviously have a vested interest in it. We don't have a vested interest in sensationalised programs on television. We don't make our money from making ambit claims or anything along those sort of lines. So, you know, let's work out where the interests lie currently. So let's take it from the top. They started off with a burst about a person. I have no knowledge of this person, wouldn't know him from a bar of soap, who turned up and purchased a product from the Perth Mint.
Single 10-ounce bar by the sounds of it.
Well, okay, so I got several issues with this. One is if some random journalist phoned you and said, "Hi, I believe you purchased a 10-ounce gold bar at the Perth Mint yesterday," would you really tell them the detail of it?
I was fairly surprised. Obviously, it was a reenactment that we heard and maybe some more choice words we used, but at some stage it sounds like, yeah, someone called him up out of the blue and said, "Did you buy gold on this date?" And he was like, "Yep."
Yeah, so, I mean, yeah, look, let's assume that he did. Let's assume that that's something that people do. I think that's a fair step, a fairly large step. But let's say that that's exactly how the transaction occurred, or the conversation occurred. So this gentleman has now turned up at the Perth Mint. He's gone to the counter and said, "I'm here to buy a 10-ounce bar." Now, I can't speak on behalf of Perth Mint. Obviously, I'm not employed by the Perth Mint. I'm not their spokesperson. Everything is done from a third-party perspective here. If that gentleman had turned up at Bullion Now, we would have said, "That's fine. We've got Perth Mint bars in for sale, no worries at all. Can we have your ID, please?" Now, in that, I noticed that in the video or the program that was played on television last night, it was never mentioned whether Perth Mint actually asked this guy for his ID. Interestingly enough, if you go to the ABC website, they've got an article about it. This is dated the 6th of March 2023, so this is yesterday. And it says very, very clearly in there, he is no longer a member of the Hells Angels, and Four Corners is not suggesting his money sourced from illegal activities, but Mr. blah, blah, blah says the Perth Mint only asked him for his driver's licence. Why didn't they say that on their program? Why have they put it in a note on a separate page altogether, unless they're trying to hide something?
And it's still phrased as a downside, I would say, in as it's they only asked, you know, there wasn't, you know.
That's all we're required to ask for
is
identification. It doesn't have to be a driver's license, it could have been a passport. But we're not asked to do a 100-point check or, you know, get 3 separate sources and one of them has to have a home address on or anything along those sort of lines. It says we must take ID. Perth Mint have done that. So that's stage 1. Stage 2, if you go to the Perth Mint website under their FAQs, what methods of payment are available? So if he'd rolled in with a suitcase full of cash, dropped it on the counter, I'm going to put an asterisk next to this in a second, but if he dropped the counter, like a basket full of cash on the counter, they would have said, "We're terribly sorry. The only methods of payments," and I'm reading directly from the FAQs on the Perth Mint website, "are EFTPOS or credit card," and associated Apple Pay, all that sort of stuff, EFT or BPay. We don't accept cash. Now, I don't know the date when this was changed because I know back in 2017, Perth Mint accepted cash back then, and I know they have changed it recently, but I believe it's been well over 12 months, but I may stand corrected on that. But at this stage, with the information that we've got, the money would have come from an electronic funds transfer. So it's the Perth Mint, and my understanding is, as a bullion dealer, if it's a cash transaction, I'm required to lodge paperwork on it with AUSTRAC. If it's not a cash transaction, I'm not required to because the bank does it on my behalf. So there's nothing here to suggest that Perth Mint's done the wrong thing. They've taken his ID. It's been an electronic funds transfer. Assuming it's been an electronic funds transfer, it's up to the bank to actually submit that. But also, even if they're suspicious, and they make this big deal about how this guy is a known entity in Perth. Look, I'm sure there's known entities in Melbourne that I have no clue who they are because I don't tend to mix in those circles. And I can tell you a funny story about
not exactly something we researched too, yeah.
Well, that's it. I mean, I used to work in Geelong and I had half the Geelong Football Club come into the place I worked and I didn't know him from a bar of soap. And everyone was surprised. But, you know, if it doesn't interest you, if that's not your circle, you're not going to recognise this guy. But let's say this guy comes in and you are suspicious of him. So we have what's called an SMR, a suspicious matter report that we lodge with AUSTRAC. Now, if a media company contacted me, and I don't know Perth Mint's policy, but I can pretty much guess, if a media company contacted me and said, we believe Mr. Bloggs came in and transacted with you on this date, I would say no comment because it's nothing to do with them. If they turn around and then say, well, he has admitted that he had a transaction in your premises on that date, I'd say, well, you know, that's between you and him. It's got nothing to do with me. No comment. Okay. He purchased an item on that date. No comment. We believe you took ID on that date. Now, they didn't say that on the program, but they did say it in the article that I quoted before that's on the ABC website. We believe he provided ID. No comment. Did you were you suspicious of this guy? No comment. Did you submit an SMR, a suspicious matter report, to AUSTRAC? No comment, because I legally can't tell you. Because one of two things. One, I'm breaching privacy. That transaction is between you and I can't tell you if I've submitted that paperwork to the government because to anyone else because I'm now breaching our privacy. But secondly, if I've submitted an SMR to AUSTRAC, that can now be part of a federal investigation and I can now jeopardise that federal investigation, which is highly illegal. So I can't say anything anyway. So the Perth Mint have been accused of doing all these things. They legally can't comment on it. And no one's actually saying whether they've done anything wrong. All they've stated, if you watch the whole thing and you read this article, they've stated that this guy came in on this date, bought a 10-ounce bar of gold, supplied his ID, his driver's licence, and he paid for it and walked out. There is nothing illegal about that at all. So I don't know what we're making a big deal of this for. All right, so that's the first part of what they ran through. Rubes, what was the second one? I've got on my high horse and I've forgotten now.
Second one was a lot to do with a lot of overseas clients and specifically about the Bank of Cyprus kind of buying on behalf of other clients and things like that.
Look, this is something, I have to admit, I don't know a lot about this. It's not something that we do as a company, and I believe, I'm led to believe, that it's not something that Perth Mint does a lot of anymore. Now, you've got to remember that these accusations go back anything up to about 15 years ago. Back then, my assumption, and this is an assumption, my assumption is that back then what was happening was a conglomerate of people were opening an account with a bank, and that bank was then opening an account with the Perth Mint in this case to hold precious metals. Now, none of those people could have rocked up at the Perth Mint and said, I'm here to collect my bar of gold. So there was a whole process in place along there. But Perth Mint, much to their credit, I'm assuming, have gone, well, we recognise the risk with the changing of the laws over the years with the AML and all that sort of stuff. We recognise that a group buying of gold, in this example, through a third party, probably exposes us on AML levels because we don't know who the third party are. So they may have gone back to that bank and said, who are you buying on behalf of? And they've gone, we're not at liberty to tell you. So Perth Mint has actually said, we're going to close those accounts down. And that's actually mentioned on the program, that those accounts were closed down. Now, they make a big deal over the fact that some accounts were left open. And if you read between the lines, I assumed, reading between the lines, that some of those accounts stayed open because some of those individuals wanted to keep them open. And that's fine. If you're an individual that has provided your ID, you can open the account. There's no problem with that. Again, it's a standard transaction and they've obeyed the law.
We've seen this recently with some of Perth's changes. I've noticed even domestically, they've kind of gone through and asked for some additional information, things like that. And that's it. If I don't send them that information, they will close, my account down. And if I, comply with their new regulations or what they're now asking for, they will keep my account open. And it's just the same thing on this international level. Yeah,
look, you've got a couple of things at play here. One is that the government changes, like Austrac changes the law as they become privy to more information and more things come out there. I mean, Apple Pay didn't exist 20 years ago, so they've got to take into account those type of transactions. So they'll change the law slightly, or they'll go, well, actually, we're not covering this area. We need to get more information on it. They changed the law not that long ago that impacted on us, and we had to change our procedures. The procedures that were applying prior to that were no longer relevant now and could be viewed negatively in hindsight. But we complied with the law then, they changed the law, we now comply with the law, we changed our procedures, we now comply with the new law. And that's fine. Perth Mint's probably done that along the line. The other thing is, every 12 months we are required to submit reports to Austrac about how we've performed over the last 12 months. And part of that is, have you gone back and looked at all your procedures and made sure they comply? So we go back over the procedures and go, well, we're doing that right, we're doing that right. Oh, actually, are we doing that right? Oh, look, we are, but we could probably do it better. So let's change our procedures. And that can impact on, certain accounts are closed, or, we require certain information or more information from people to make sure that we're complying with all those requirements. I can tell you as a bullion dealer, it is incredibly important to us that we comply with all the regulations, because none of us want, it's the equivalent of you getting an audit from the tax office. None of us want that. It doesn't mean that we're doing anything wrong. It just means we don't want to be scrutinised to the nth degree, because we're human. We make mistakes. And we don't, we're quite happy for someone to say, actually, look, you're kind of not complying here. But we don't want people to go, oh, you didn't comply here, we're going to fine you $1 gazillion. And even though you've done it inadvertently.
We actually saw that with the internal report that they said they got their hands on, where they were talking about their IT system. Yeah. And Perth talking about the fact, well, hey, actually, we recognise this as an area that we're not happy with, we want to improve. And so they made steps in their IT system to actually improve that. And, it is about that kind of adapting to the changing landscape.
And they got criticised for recognising that they had a grey area. They weren't even saying we're not complying. They're saying this isn't doing it well.
We're not happy with the fact that the information was in multiple places, I think it said. So we'd like it streamlined so that it's all in one place, easy to access, easy for that transparency.
Which is exactly what you want.
Exactly.
So it would be different if they went, we recognise that this is a problem for us, we're going to sweep it under the carpet and ignore it. But they didn't. They said, we recognise this is a problem, we're running multiple systems, so it's very difficult to comply. We now need to have it all streamlined into one system so we can now comply. So, give me a break here. What do you want from the guys?
Yeah.
So, well and truly blown out of proportion. Yeah, okay, there might be errors there. CBA, I think it was Commonwealth Bank, put their hand up a few years ago and said, look, we made an error with our compliance with Austrac. In these accounts, Austrac said, absolutely, you did the wrong thing. They smacked them for it, and off they went again. But they self-reported, the same as we all do when we make mistakes. I don't know what else they wanted from them, So anyway, what was the third thing?
The third thing, which I think has got a couple of people worried, and I think it's an important one to touch on, is the accusations of Perth Mint's doping, which they explained was putting silver into their bars, and they were kind of hazy about kind of what percentages or whatever that was causing it to fall below, but the general gist has been that people are worried about the purity of bars coming out of the Perth Mint, and particularly ones that they've retrospectively bought, and obviously that applies to us as well, having sold people Perth Mint bars. So,
all right. Yeah. So let's break this down. Oh man. All right. So the bars that they were talking, the bar that they were talking about.
Yes.
This is singular. One bar was sent to the Shanghai Metals Exchange. Okay. One bar out of the gazillion, and they had They actually gave an amount at one point.
They did, absolutely.
How many tons was it?
Quite a few. I'll flash that up on screen now. And it's kind of...
Lots of tons.
Yeah. Like the way they were phrasing it was, it could have been the entire thing. So they were kind of pushing those larger numbers. But yeah, once you actually drill down into it, it was one that had fallen. Yeah.
So it's 1 bar, right?
Yep.
Now, it's not a 1 ounce bar. It's not a 50 gram bar. It's not a 100 gram bar. It's not even... they don't actually specify what size bar it is. But I can tell you that the Shanghai goods delivery... and I've actually got their stuff up here. So I need my eyes. Where do I put them? So the bars that the Shanghai Gold Exchange accepts are 12.5 kilo bars, 3 kilo bars, 1 kilo bars, 100 gram bars and 50 gram bars. Now the 50 gram, 100 gram and 1 kilo bars all must be 4 nines. There is no tolerance for error there. And if one came through, it would be rejected. I'll come back to that statement in a second. So that leaves us with the 1 kilo, the 3 kilo and the 12.5 kilo. So the 1 kilo has tolerances on it. The others, the 1 and greater have tolerances that they have to meet. The others don't. Basically, they have to be the same as what we'd supply. 50 gram bar, 100 gram bar, 4 nines, correct weight, no errors. So I'm going on, I can't, what I've done is I've actually downloaded their PDF. So if you go onto the Shanghai Good Delivery Gold Ingots and Bars for the Shanghai Metals Exchange, it will actually break it down for you if you want to look at it. So it goes through the source of the bars. It's lots of pages of etceteras. Then it talks about weights. So, and this is their statements. While the 12.5 and 3 kilo ingots can range between defined parameters, 1 kilo bars must not weigh less than 1 kilo. And then it goes through. So the 1 kilo bar has to be a minimum of 1 kilo and a maximum of 1,000.05 grams. Very tight tolerance. The 3 kilo bar can be anywhere between 2,950 and 3,050 grams. So it can actually be underweight and they will still accept it. The 12.5 kilo bar can be anywhere from 12 kilos, so it's half a kilo under, to 12.65 kilos. So it's quite a spread there in weight. And then they are paid on the actual weight. Now, this is not to say that Perth Mint bars or any other bars that come through are underweight. The tolerances on the bars that you buy from the likes of Bullion Now, even if they've got the Perth Mint stamp on it or any other stamp, will be at a minimum weight. The same as if you're buying a kilo of apples from Woolies, it has to be a minimum of 1 kilo. If it's underweight, Woolies would get smacked for it. So we'd all get smacked for it if a gold bar was underweight. However, the Shanghai Metals Exchange has decided that they will accept on the large bars a slight tolerance on those weights to allow for a slight underweight one.
And we see that with some of the industrial sizes, same in silver as well. Your 1,000 ounce bars, you see them above, you see them below, but they still market them as 1,000 ounce bars.
We're about to release, we did a big buyback that Reuben and I haven't filmed yet, but we did a big buyback today of 80 by 1,000 ounce bars. And I'll guarantee you when we get to break them down, some of them will weigh 980 ounces and some of them will weigh 1,015 ounces. It's just the way industrial bars are. It's, there's a tolerance in there and they meet that tolerance. Then it goes through the size tolerance, so they must be X number of millimetres length and width, so we're not worried about. It also talks about the stamp, if it's got to have a stamp and what sort of grades on it. And then it actually talks about the grades. Now this is where it starts to become a little more interesting. Now this only applies to, I'll start at the bottom of it and I'm going to read upwards. So 1 kilo bars are required to be grade, actually I won't, let me go back up to the top. They will accept 4 grades of bars in gold. So a grade 1 bar must be 4 nines gold. A grade 2 bar must be a grade 2 bar is called 3 nines 5, and it can be anywhere between 4 nines gold, 4 nines pure, sorry, and 3 nines 5. So you've got 0.05% there. That can be an impurity of some kind. Grade 3 will be 3 nines, is considered 3 nines. That's anywhere between 99.95 and 3 nines. So you can see they're not allowing you to go below it, but they are allowing you to go above it. And then grade 4 is 2 nines 5, and for it to meet its correct fineness, it's got to be 3 nines down to 295. So you can see there's quite a tolerance in there. What you've got to understand is when these bars are submitted to the exchange, they are paid on their grade. So for a 1 kilo bar, it must be grade 1. It must be 4/9 gold. No worries at all. If it's anything below 4/9 gold, they're going to reject it. If you're providing 12.5 kilo or 3 kilo bars, which is what most industrial bars are in gold, grade can vary. Most 12.5 kilo bars are 4/9 gold, and 3 kilo bars are 3/9 and that's saying most of them. But if you're supplying a grade, let's say a grade 3 bar, it's got to be 3/9. If you're 3/9 3/9 3/9 3/9 they're only going to pay you for 3/9. So you're not going to put in more gold than you are required to, because you're not going to be paid for the extra. So they are going to blend it down as close as they can without going underneath. You're not going to do that with 4/9. If you start running the numbers, actually, let's run the numbers right now. On a 1 ounce, no, blow it, let's go on a kilo bar. So you're going to have 0.1 of a gram of purity. If you manage to blend it, you're going to get 0.1 of a gram. Is that right, Rubes?
Think so.
On a kilo bar. So we're talking on an $85,000 to $90,000 bar, you're going to save 0.1 of a gram. 0.1 of a gram. What's gold right at this second, Rubes?
That I don't know. Although, speaking of, another just little side point that I thought was interesting, as a part of the Australian report, they didn't even bother to check spot price in Australia, and all they were quoting was USD. Which I know it's what the industry moves in, but I would have thought for an Australian program that they would have at least mentioned it, but you know.
All right, so gold at the moment is $88.17. So 0.1 of a gram multiplied by 88.17. Right, so $8.80, near enough. It's just over $8.80. Per kilo, on an $85,000 bar, you're going to save $8.80 if you blend it down. This is on a kilo bar, mind you. I can tell you that Perth Mint is not going to risk their reputation on on saving $8.80 on a kilo bar. They're just, it's not. Can you imagine somebody trying to measure in 0.1 of a gram of silver into every kilo bar cast that goes past them? It would cost more in labour to do that than it would to actually try and cut it down to that. Now, it's different on a 12.5 kilo bar. Because if we're supplying, let's take this to an extreme. If I've got a 12.5 kilo bar and it only has to be 995, oops. So minus 12,500, you can actually save yourself 62.5 grams on that. So let's multiply that out by our $88.17. That's $5,500. So it's now worth, okay, so let me break this backwards for you. If I supply this is slightly unfair. If I supplied a 12.5 kilo bar and it was a grade 4 bar, if I put any more purity in it than not 295, I'm going to lose up to $5,500 for every one of those bars. Now, it's now worth making sure that that bar is 995 or 996, not 9999. And that is where this term of doping comes from. Because what we're now trying to do is make sure that we're not wasting $5,500 when we're supplying a grade 4 bar to the Shanghai Metals Exchange. It's got nothing to do with Perth Mint's going in and they're trying to sprinkle in a little bit to every 1 ounce bar and they're going to save themselves 3 cents on every one that goes through. Because they're not going to do it. It's going to cost them far more. And even this program admits that that practice was stopped several years ago. So unless you've bought 12.5 kilo bars from the Perth Mint or 3 kilo bars from the Perth Mint, the chances of it being doped are slim to microscopic, and I would say are zero. But let's assume there's a very small chance out there because there was one bar that was questioned. And I want to come back to that bar in a second. So if you've bought anything below a 3 kilo bar out of Perth, your bar is fine. If you're in doubt about that bar, absolutely bring it back to Bullion Now. We will XRF it in front of you because we will stand behind every single bar that we sell. And I tell you, I'm not going to risk the reputation of a multi-million-dollar company on 1 ounce not going out pure. So it's not going to happen, okay? But if you're worried about it at all, bring it straight back in. We will XRF it on the spot right in front of you, no questions asked. And heaven forbid, if anything turned out to be not pure, then absolutely we would refund the money. But all of those bars are exactly what they're stamped, and I will stand behind every single one of them that goes out from Bullion Now.
That was Perth Mint's comment as well, even on the program, was that what they did, besides potentially this other one, still met the industrial standards. And I think that was kind of, they didn't get into the specific grades or anything like that, but their comments basically still said, hey, whilst it may not have been, you know, the 4.9s or whatever, it still met industrial standards.
So out of the multiple tons of gold that they've supplied, and we're only talking one supply contract to the Shanghai one, never mind all the others they go to, one bar has been rejected that they could actually find evidence of. Now, they don't tell us why that bar was rejected. They never say in there that it was rejected due purity, due weight, due the stamp being in the wrong position, because they have pretty exacting standards on that. It might have been the wrong size bar. It might have been, I'd have to go back up through the 50 million pages, but you know, it might be 3 mil out the wrong side. It might be, you know, 1250 millimeters instead of 1253 millimeters. Who knows? You know, any of these things could have kicked in to reject that bar. Now let's assume this was rejected, even for purity. Let's assume it was rejected. The Shanghai Metals Exchange was so stressed about the rejection of it that they never returned the bar. Now think about that for a minute. This is potentially a 12.5 kilo bar, and they went, no, we're not going to return it, don't worry about it.
She'll be all right, mate.
Really? Really? I mean, let's use some common sense here. Now, they come up with this statement about how, you know, due to export restrictions from China, this was never returned. That's all well and good. I've read China reject boatloads of Australian meats. They have no problem rejecting it. They have no problem sending it back if there's an issue there, a major issue there. Now, my suspicion, I have no evidence of this, exactly the same as from the program that I saw, they have no hard evidence of why this thing was rejected. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my assumption at this stage. The assumption would be that if they didn't return the bar, the same as you'd go, oh, look, you know, this didn't quite meet standard, whatever that be. Look, knock a bit off and we'll call it even. Because that's what most people would do. But if a 12.5 kilo bar was really that far out, they'd be straight on the phone going, hang on a sec, you've sent us a 12.5 kilo bar of lead, we want to return it. You know, they're not going to go, oh, don't worry about it, it's only a 12.5 kilo bar. No one's going to do that. So the fact that they didn't return it, I think speaks volumes about that.
The scale of the issue, yeah.
And they're still ordering to this day. If it was that bad an experience, do you think the Shanghai Metals Exchange would still be going, yeah, send us another ton? They'd be going, absolutely not.
We're not dealing with you again.
Yeah, there's heaps of suppliers out there. We'll go to one of the others. I can't overemphasise how much this is I don't want to say that we don't take it seriously, because obviously everyone takes these sorts of things seriously.
There's a lot of new eyes on it as well, you know, that will take their opinion of the Perth Mint, the industry, gold and silver in general off of this. So it is important, but
take it, run it through your logic check. Don't believe Perth Mint, don't believe this journalist, don't believe me. Run it through your own logic check. If you received a bar that was substandard, would you continue dealing with that? If it was bad enough, would you continue dealing with that company? Would you return the product? Of course you would. You know, if someone was doing the dodgy and was being illegal, would you still deal with them? No, you wouldn't. If they weren't trying their best to produce a good product and doing it ethically and legally to the best of their ability, would they still be in business? No, they wouldn't. Would you still trade with them? No, you wouldn't. So run it through some logic checks and then come to your own conclusion on this. Don't believe the media beat up. Don't believe me. Run it through your own filters and then come to your own conclusion. And I'll stand here on the camera and say categorically, if you've got a Perth Mint bar and you want it tested, bring it into Bullion Now. Level 6, 227 Collins Street in Melbourne. Bring it in. We will test it. If you're still worried about it, or you don't live in Victoria, you don't live near Melbourne and you can't do it, take it into another bullion dealer and say, can you XRF this? If they refuse, I probably wouldn't deal with that bullion dealer again, but let's assume they do and they say it's fake. And let's say you've bought it from Bullion Now. You jump on the phone, you say, hey, I've had this bar tested at XYZ bullion dealers. They say it's not pure. Our response is going to be, ship it down to us immediately. We will open it under camera. We will test it under camera. We will absolutely refund it if it shows that it's underweight or under purity. We will have it melted down if you want and actually verified that way through either that refinery, if it's the Perth Mint, or through a third party, so we can have an independent review of it. I have no issue with that at all because I stand behind the products BN sells and I stand behind, in this case, I stand behind the Bullion Now, the Perth Mint products that we have sold because I'm not going to jeopardise my company or my reputation on it.
Simple as that.
I don't know. Anything else? I'm right up on my soapbox, so I could do this for hours.
No, I don't think so. There's obviously going to be, particular comments and particular, it was a fairly kind of, broad program. So I'm sure there's going to be people that have other questions and other queries about it. So feel free to drop some of them below. We'll try and hit some of them in the comments. And, if there's some that require further explanation, we might do another video, or we might hit it as a part of our live streams that we should be doing later this week. So yeah, feel free to ask them below and yeah.
To say, we're taking this seriously, which is why I've got no problem doing this video and no problem answering any questions that you've got on this. I'm quite happy to do it. So I'm not hiding from it. I can only answer it from a Bullion Now perspective, and as a distributor, I can't answer it obviously from a Perth Mint perspective. But I'm quite happy to have the conversations and give you an industry insider's view of it. We're not frightened of this at all. And again, we stand by the product the whole way through. So we're not hiding. Obviously, we believe it.
That's it. All right. We will, like I said, type your questions down below and we'll get back to some of them and we will see you in the next video.
Sounds good. See ya.
See ya.